In 1945, American intelligence officers made a deal with Japanese war criminals who had conducted human experiments that made Joseph Mengele look like an amateur. The Japanese scientists had performed live vivisections without anesthesia. They had frozen people alive to study frostbite. They had tested plague bombs on Chinese villages. They had dissected pregnant women. They had infected thousands with diseases and documented how they died. The Americans knew all of this. They had the evidence. They had testimonies. They had photographs. And they gave every single scientist immunity from prosecution. Not one faced trial at the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal. Not one went to prison. Not one faced execution. In exchange for their data, the unit was called Unit 731. Between 1932 and 1945, it killed at least 10,000 people in direct experiments. It killed another 300,000 or more through biological warfare attacks on Chinese civilians. It was Japan's secret bioweapons program, and it committed atrocities that shocked even hardened war crimes investigators. And America covered it up, granted immunity, and hired some of the scientists. This is Unit 731. The death factory you've never heard of. The war crimes America buried. The human experiments that were too valuable to prosecute. This is why some Chinese people still hate Japan. This is why Japan's neighbors don't trust their apologies. This is what happens when science operates without ethics and governments prioritize military advantage over justice. And this is the story they don't teach in school. Unit 731 officially began in 1936, but its origins go back to 1932, when Japan invaded Manchuria, the northeastern region of China. Japan established a puppet state called Manchukuo and used it as a base for military expansion and colonial exploitation. A Japanese military doctor named Shirō Ishii convinced the Imperial Japanese Army that biological weapons could give Japan a strategic advantage. Chemical weapons had been used in World War I, but they were crude. Biological weapons, disease-causing bacteria and viruses, could be more devastating. They could wipe out enemy populations while leaving infrastructure intact. They were the ultimate weapon. The Japanese military agreed. They gave Ishii funding, facilities, and complete freedom to develop biological weapons. They established the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department, a deliberately boring name designed to hide its real purpose. Everyone called it Unit 731. The facility was built outside Harbin in Manchuria. It was enormous, over 6 square kilometers. It had laboratories, animal testing facilities, crematoria, and prison blocks. It employed over 3,000 people, scientists, technicians, guards, administrative staff, and it had a steady supply of human test subjects. The Japanese military provided prisoners to Unit 731 for experimentation. They called them maruta, logs, not people. Logs. That's how they justified what they did. These weren't humans, they were logs. Raw material for experiments. The prisoners came from several sources. Chinese civilians accused of being spies or resistance fighters, often with no evidence. Soviet prisoners of war, Korean prisoners, Mongolian prisoners, some Allied POWs, though in smaller numbers, men, women, children, pregnant women, babies. They were brought to Unit 731. They were imprisoned in the facility, and they became test subjects for experiments that violated every principle of human decency. The experiments at Unit 731 were designed to advance biological warfare and test human limits under extreme conditions. They weren't random torture, they were systematic research. That's what makes them so horrifying. They were methodical, documented, and conducted by trained doctors and scientists who knew exactly what they were doing. Vivisection without anesthesia. Scientists would infect prisoners with diseases, plague, cholera, anthrax, typhoid, and then dissect them alive to observe how the disease progressed through organs. No anesthesia. They wanted to see organs functioning while infected. They couldn't do that if the subject was dead or sedated, so they cut open living people and watched them die on the operating table while documenting everything. This wasn't rare. This was standard procedure. Thousands of prisoners were vivisected alive. Pregnant women were infected, then dissected to see how diseases affected fetuses. Doctors would remove organs one by one to see how long the body could survive. They would document heart rates, breathing patterns, screaming duration. All of it recorded in medical journals. Frostbite experiments. Unit 731 studied frostbite to help Japanese soldiers fighting in cold climates. They would take prisoners outside in winter. Manchurian winters reached -40 degrees Celsius and expose their limbs to freezing temperatures. Sometimes they'd pour water over arms or legs to accelerate freezing. They'd force prisoners to stand in the cold until their limbs froze solid. Then they'd bring them inside and test different thawing methods. They'd dunk frozen limbs in hot water, warm water, leave them at room temperature. They'd document which method caused the most tissue damage, which caused gangrene, which allowed recovery. If prisoners survived, they'd be refrozen and the experiment repeated. Same prisoner, multiple freeze-thaw cycles until their limbs were destroyed beyond use. Then they'd be used for other experiments or killed. Pressure chamber experiments. Scientists wanted to study what happened to the human body at different altitudes and pressures. They'd put prisoners in pressure chambers and gradually reduce pressure to simulate high altitude. They'd document exactly when eyes would pop from their sockets due to pressure differential, when organs would rupture, when lungs would collapse, when death occurred, all observed through windows and recorded. Biological weapon testing. This was the core mission. Unit 731 developed bombs filled with plague-infected fleas, anthrax, cholera, and other pathogens. They needed to test effectiveness, so they'd tie prisoners to stakes outside and detonate biological bombs at various distances. They'd observe infection rates, symptom progression, and death rates. They'd test different bacteria strains to find the most lethal. They'd vary bomb designs to maximize dispersal. Survivors of initial infections would be kept alive to document disease progression. When they died, they'd be autopsied to confirm cause of death and organ damage. Nothing was wasted. Every death generated data. Weapon testing. Unit 731 also tested conventional weapons on human subjects. They'd test flamethrowers to study burn patterns. They'd test grenades at different distances to map shrapnel damage. They'd shoot prisoners with different caliber bullets to compare wound characteristics. They'd test bayonets and swords to determine optimal stabbing techniques. This wasn't combat. This was controlled experimentation using live human targets. Disease injection experiments. Scientists would inject prisoners with various diseases to study progression and transmission. They'd inject multiple diseases simultaneously to study interactions. They'd try to create new disease strains by cross-contamination. They'd infect prisoners and then house them with uninfected prisoners to study transmission rates. They documented everything: how long until symptoms appeared, how quickly the disease spread, how long until death, what percentage of exposed prisoners became infected, all recorded in detailed medical journals. Surgical experiments. Doctors practiced new surgical techniques on prisoners without anesthesia. They'd perform amputations to practice speed. They'd practice organ removal. They'd practice battlefield surgery, gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, by creating those injuries on prisoners and then attempting treatment. If the prisoner died during practice, there were always more prisoners. The supply was constant. The death toll from experiments is estimated at 10,000 to 12,000 people. That's direct experimentation, deaths only. The number who died in biological warfare attacks is much higher. Unit 731 didn't just conduct experiments in labs. They tested biological weapons in the field on actual Chinese civilians. Between 1940 and 1945, Unit 731 conducted biological warfare attacks on at least 11 Chinese cities. They dropped plague-infected fleas from aircraft. They contaminated water supplies with cholera and typhoid. They left plague-infected food in areas where civilians would find it. They released plague-infected rats in residential areas. The results were devastating. Plague outbreaks killed thousands of Chinese civilians. In some cities, 20 to 30% of the population died. The epidemics continued for years after the initial attacks because plague became endemic in local rat populations. The most well-documented attack was on Ningbo in October 1940. Japanese aircraft dropped plague-infected fleas over residential areas. Within weeks, plague broke out. At least 500 people died, possibly many more. The outbreak continued for months. Entire neighborhoods were quarantined. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried or cremated. Similar attacks occurred in Changde in 1941, where plague killed approximately 7,643 people, according to the International Symposium on the Crimes of Bacteriological Warfare. In Kuzhou, in 1942, biological attacks may have killed over 50,000 people from plague and other diseases. Conservative estimates put biological warfare deaths at 200,000 Chinese civilians. Some historians estimate 300,000 to 400,000 when including secondary infections and epidemic deaths. The exact number is unknown because many deaths occurred in rural areas with limited record keeping. and Japan destroyed most documentation before surrender. But the scale was massive. Entire cities experienced epidemic-level mortality from deliberately introduced diseases. This wasn't collateral damage. This was intentional biological warfare targeting civilian populations, and it's recognized as a war crime under international law. The 1925 Geneva Protocol explicitly banned biological warfare. Japan signed but never ratified it, and even without ratification, using disease as a weapon against civilians violated every standard of warfare. In August 1945, Japan surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war was over. The Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal was established to prosecute Japanese war criminals, similar to the Nuremberg trials in Germany. Unit 731 personnel knew they'd committed war crimes. They knew what they'd done violated international law. They knew if the Soviets or Chinese captured them, they'd face execution. So they destroyed everything. They demolished the main facility. They blew up buildings. They killed the remaining prisoners. None could be left alive to testify. They burned documents. They destroyed bacterial stocks. They tried to eliminate all evidence. Some personnel fled to Japan. Others surrendered to advancing American forces. And that's when American intelligence made the devil's bargain. General Douglas MacArthur and American intelligence officers learned about Unit 731's experiments. They obtained testimonies from captured personnel. They realized Unit 731 had conducted human experimentation on a scale larger than anything Nazi doctors had done. They had data on biological weapons that no other country possessed. And they wanted that data. American military intelligence decided the scientific data was more valuable than justice. They made a deal. Immunity from prosecution in exchange for complete disclosure of all research. Shirō Ishii, the commander of Unit 731 and architect of the biological warfare program, was granted immunity. He was never charged with war crimes. He was never tried. He faced no consequences. He lived in Japan until his death in 1959. Other Unit 731 scientists received immunity as well. Some went on to prominent medical careers in Japan. Some worked for pharmaceutical companies. Some became university professors. Some advised the Japanese government on public health. The Americans got the data, thousands of pages of research, detailed documentation of human experiments, information on biological weapon development, all of it classified and incorporated into American biological weapons programs. The Soviets conducted their own trials. In 1949, they held the Khabarovsk war crime trials, prosecuting 12 members of Unit 731 and related units. The defendants were convicted and sentenced to prison, but these were lower-ranking personnel, not the leadership. The Soviets wanted to expose American complicity in the cover-up more than they wanted comprehensive justice. China requested extradition of Unit 731 personnel for trial. America refused. The American position was that they had insufficient evidence for prosecution. This was a lie. They had extensive documentation. They had confessions. They had testimonies. They chose not to prosecute. The reasoning was geopolitical. The Cold War was beginning. The Soviet Union had biological weapons programs. China was becoming communist. America needed every military advantage. The data from Unit 731, obtained through horrific human experimentation, was considered strategically valuable. So they buried it. They classified everything. They granted immunity. They let war criminals go free. And for decades, almost no one outside Japan, China, and intelligence circles knew about Unit 731. The full extent of Unit 731's crimes didn't become widely known until the 1980s and 1990s. Journalists and historians began investigating. Japanese researchers uncovered documents the military had failed to destroy. Chinese survivors came forward with testimonies. In 1981, American writer John W. Powell published Japan's biological weapons in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, exposing the American cover-up. In 1984, Japanese journalist Morimura Seiichi published The Devil's Gluttony, documenting Unit 731 based on interviews with former personnel. Former Unit 731 members began confessing as they aged. Some expressed remorse, many didn't. Some maintained they were conducting necessary military research. Some refused to discuss it at all, but the evidence accumulated. Photographs emerged. Documents surfaced. The Harbin facility site was excavated, revealing mass graves, human remains, and laboratory equipment. In 2002, the Tokyo District Court acknowledged Unit 731's existence and crimes in a ruling on compensation claims by Chinese survivors. The court confirmed biological warfare attacks occurred and caused civilian deaths, but the court rejected compensation claims because too much time had passed and Japan's statute of limitations had expired. Japan has never officially apologized specifically for Unit 731. The government acknowledges it existed and conducted regrettable activities, but avoids detailed admissions. Japanese textbooks mention it briefly or not at all. Many young Japanese people don't know it existed. China teaches Unit 731 extensively. The Harbin facility site is now a museum documenting the atrocities. Chinese survivors and their families continue demanding apologies and compensation. Japan's failure to fully acknowledge Unit 731 remains a source of tension between China and Japan. Here's what makes Unit 731 historically significant, beyond the immediate horror. Scale of human experimentation. Unit 731 conducted systematic human experimentation on at least 10,000 people, possibly as many as 20,000 if you include smaller affiliated units. That's larger than Nazi human experimentation programs. Mengele at Auschwitz is estimated to have experimented on about 1,500 people. Unit 731 operated multiple facilities, conducting thousands of experiments over more than a decade. Biological warfare development. Unit 731 advanced biological weapons technology significantly. They developed effective delivery systems, identified the most lethal disease strains, and conducted large-scale field tests. Their research informed biological weapons programs globally during the Cold War. American complicity. The United States government knowingly granted immunity to war criminals in exchange for scientific data obtained through human experimentation. This established a precedent. Military advantage trumps justice. Strategic value exceeds moral considerations. Data is more important than accountability. Ongoing consequences. Unit 731's biological warfare attacks caused epidemics that persisted for years. Plague became endemic in areas where it was introduced. People died from those diseases for years after the war ended. Some historians argue residual health effects continued for decades in affected regions. Failure of international law. Unit 731 demonstrated that war crimes tribunals are selective. German and Japanese leaders were prosecuted at Nuremberg and Tokyo, but Unit 731 personnel received immunity. Rocket engineers. Their work didn't inherently involve mass murder, even though slave labor built their rockets. Unit 731 scientists were murderers. Their research was conducted by killing people. Every piece of data came from human suffering, and America decided that data was worth more than justice. Was the data even useful? Historians and bioethicists debate this. Some American military officials later admitted the data was less valuable than anticipated. Much of it confirmed what Allied scientists already knew or could have discovered through ethical animal testing. The information on biological weapon delivery systems was useful, but not revolutionary. Other analysts argue the data was militarily significant and informed American biological weapons development during the Cold War. The US operated its own biological weapons program, Fort Detrick in Maryland, from 1943 to 1969. Some Unit 731 data was incorporated into that program. But even if the data was useful, the ethical calculation remains. Was it worth granting immunity to mass murderers? Was scientific knowledge obtained through torture and human experimentation acceptable because it might provide military advantage? The medical and scientific communities have largely answered no. Data obtained through unethical experimentation should not be used, regardless of its scientific value. Using such data validates the experiments and incentivizes future atrocities. The Nuremberg Code, established after the Nazi doctor's trial, codified this principle. Human experimentation requires informed consent and ethical oversight, but that code was established in 1947, after America had already granted immunity to Unit 731. The timing is significant. American officials knew about Unit 731's crimes before the Nuremberg Code was written. They chose to protect those scientists anyway. Then they helped create an international code condemning exactly what those scientists had done. Hypocrisy doesn't fully capture it. It was strategic calculation, prioritizing military advantage over human rights. Shirō Ishii, the commander of Unit 731, lived a comfortable post-war life. He returned to Japan. He advised the American occupation on public health issues, ironic given his crimes. He worked privately as a medical consultant. He died of throat cancer in 1959 at age 67. He never faced trial. He never publicly apologized. He expressed no remorse. Other Unit 731 scientists had successful careers. Some worked for Japanese pharmaceutical companies, applying their medical knowledge commercially. Some became professors at Japanese universities, teaching the next generation of doctors. Some advised the Japanese government on infectious disease policy. The Japanese medical establishment largely protected them. Universities hired them. Medical associations accepted them. The government used their expertise. Japan's post-war miraculous economic recovery included contributions from scientists who'd conducted human experiments. Some former Unit 731 members did express remorse later in life. A few gave testimonies admitting their crimes, but many maintained silence until death. Some claimed they were following orders. Some said they didn't fully understand what they were doing was wrong at the time. Some insisted their research served a greater good, advancing medical knowledge and protecting Japan. None of those justifications hold up ethically. They were doctors. They knew their experiments violated medical ethics. They knew they were torturing and killing people. They chose to continue anyway. Unit 731 proves that ordinary people, educated doctors and scientists with families and normal lives, can commit systematic atrocities when institutions enable them and governments protect them. The Unit 731 Museum in Harbin, China displays evidence of the atrocities: surgical tools, laboratory equipment, photographs, testimonies. It's one of China's most visited museums. Chinese schoolchildren tour it as part of history education. The message is clear. Remember what Japan did. Remember that they haven't fully acknowledged it. Remember that America helped them escape justice. The museum fuels anti-Japanese sentiment in China. It's a reminder of historical grievances that shape current geopolitics. When Japan disputes islands with China or revises history textbooks, Chinese media references Unit 731. When Japan's Prime Minister visits the Yasukuni Shrine, where Class A war criminals are enshrined, Chinese officials mention Unit 731. The crimes continue to poison relations between China and Japan, and America's role in the cover-up contributes to Chinese distrust of the United States. The complete history of Unit 731 is the history of what happens when science operates without ethics, when governments prioritize military advantage over justice, and when war criminals escape accountability because powerful countries decide their knowledge is more valuable than their punishment. 10,000 to 12,000 people killed in experiments, another 200,000 to 400,000 killed in biological warfare attacks. Systematic torture, live vivisection, disease testing, and weapon development using human subjects. And not one scientist faced justice at the Tokyo Tribunal. Not one went to prison for war crimes. Not one was executed because America wanted their data. That's Unit 731. The death factory that was too useful to prosecute. The war crimes that were too valuable to punish. The human experiments that America decided were worth covering up. Japan hasn't fully apologized. America hasn't acknowledged its role in the cover-up. The scientists who committed these atrocities lived comfortable lives and died peacefully. And the lesson learned by governments worldwide was simple. If your war crimes generate strategically valuable information, powerful allies will protect you from justice. That's not conspiracy theory, that's documented history. American government files prove the immunity deals. Japanese court rulings acknowledge the crimes occurred. Chinese archaeological sites contain the physical evidence. Unit 731 happened. America covered it up. War criminals went free. And that's why some things are worse than Mengele. Because at least Mengele was prosecuted at Nuremberg. At least the world acknowledged Nazi human experimentation was criminal. Unit 731 scientists got immunity deals and consulting contracts. That's the complete history of Unit 731. The Japanese death factory that killed hundreds of thousands, conducted human experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics, and faced no justice because America decided their research was more important than their crimes. 300,000 dead, zero accountability, and the data was probably less useful than anticipated. That's Unit 731. And that's what happens when military advantage matters more than human life.